Every couple of years, every media outlet in the St. Louis area discovers they have a problem with their schools. So they dutifully find a school, they dutifully find a few abused teachers, and they remind everybody how screwed up the schools are, how they're dark, dirty, and dangerous places where nobody's learning. And the latest object of this attention is a little school district in the St. Louis area called Hazelwood. Yeah, that includes a little town called Ferguson. Anyway, if you go to greatschools.org, that's where you get all the information about the schools and the districts. They will tell you that in Hazelwood, because it is so diverse, this should be the school district that has like all the benefits of diversity, because diversity has lots of long-term benefits to students. Yes, they actually say that. Well, let's see how it turned out.
Classrooms trashed, children so disruptive, teachers are forced to take extreme measures. It is a nationwide problem, and it's impacting school districts all around the St. Louis area.
News 4 investigator Chris Negus explains why more teachers are dealing with the chaos in the classroom and why parents aren't being kept in the loop.
I just felt like I was kind of drowning.
That's how Margaret Powers describes her final year of teaching in the Hazelwood School District. After 7 years of teaching, behavior issues at the elementary level pushed her to say enough. That was 2 years ago.
Tearing things apart, walking on top of the desks and on the tables and hitting kids, and I mean, all those kinds of things happened like way too regularly.
Is this one of the reasons why you ultimately quit?
It was a driving factor, yeah.
She documented the curse words drawn on desks aimed at other kids. Children lying on the floor, refusing to follow directions. Even young kids tearing up homework assignments in her face. And in some cases, much worse.
I know somebody who had a concussion from a kid cracking a clipboard over their head. A teacher, their teacher, the kid took a clipboard and took it to their head, and she had a concussion and she was gone for several days.
And that was while you were there?
Oh, yeah.
And she remembers something else, a situation where one child's behavior was so disruptive, she removed the well-behaved kids from the classroom to keep them safe.
He would tear apart the classroom. I did evacuate the classroom several times in that year.
And what do you mean by that, evacuate the classroom?
He was behaving in a way that scared me for the safety of my students and myself, but mostly my students. And so I safely removed them from the classroom because he wasn't responding to any cues or requests or anything else. So I wanted them away from him.
The other students?
Yes.
Stories of classrooms getting cleared might surprise parents, but it doesn't surprise teachers. Power's story isn't unique.
Is the job of a teacher harder today than it was just 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
Absolutely.
Pat McPartland is the president of the union that represents teachers in the Parkway District.
Is it that we need to, as you alluded to before, do we need to evacuate a classroom because when the student acts up, we need to make sure that they are safe and other kids are safe?
And does that happen?
Yes, in rare circumstances. But yeah, it could be part of a behavior intervention plan.
Those plans offer teachers guidance. In the Parkway District, approximately 1% of the students follow one. That's 200 out of the 17,000 kids.
At what point does that child who's misbehaving, at what point does his right to have the classroom cleared override the right of the kids who want to learn?
That is an outstanding question, and I think that's a dilemma.
News 4 asked multiple area districts how many students are on behavior intervention plans. In the Ladue district, it's approximately 1% of the student body. That's similar to Parkway. In Belleville and East St. Louis, it's approximately 3%. The Fox School District, less than 1%. These numbers might not sound high, but districts are dealing with increased behavior challenges. And that's why the Parkway District recently convened a mental health task force to deal with rising social and emotional issues.
Is it caused by a trauma at home? Is it caused by an event that's occurred? Is there an underlying social, emotional, behavioral issue that we know that's not diagnosed?
Figuring out the issue is a challenge in every district. Matt Phillips is the assistant superintendent of student services in Hazelwood.
And when you have children that experience a lot of trauma, that manifests itself in various ways in classrooms.
Sometimes that's bad behavior. Phillips explained why classrooms get cleared.
One of the strategies is to remove the audience so that you can de-escalate the child.
And how often does that happen?
I don't have any data on that particular subject with me.
So that's not tracked?
That's not track.
The parents of the well-behaved children, do they find out about this, or how are they alerted?
They are not alerted because you're working with a student and you're satisfying that student's needs. The student who may be in crisis at that moment, you're working with that student. And so the whole point is, they step out to the hallway, and as soon as it's done, they step back in.
A situation like that could be perceived as disruptive to the learning environment, correct?
Absolutely.
So what would you say to the parents of the well-behaved children who are in a classroom that have to be removed because another kid is disrupting the room?
I would say that we have an obligation to teach all children, and we have an obligation to work with students to not only teach students how to de-escalate themselves and how to regulate themselves, but we also have an obligation to other students. The world is changing. The world is a very diverse place. And we have an obligation to help other students understand that we support kids that are in crisis.
And that's more evident today than in years past. Hazelwood has doubled the number of social workers in its schools. Teachers are trained in de-escalation techniques that don't require physical intervention. Each school has a crisis intervention team on site, and teachers now have a place to escape to for a break.
A lot of our buildings have what they're calling staff wellness rooms, where they have massage chairs and places to go to de-escalate, to decompress, when it gets tough. Because we know working with kids with trauma, is tough.
But for teachers like Powers, it wasn't enough. And she says the solution goes beyond what any school district can provide.
Another really big thing was getting parents on board. It definitely starts with the school, but the school is not raising children. We're there to educate your children.
Another educator told me it might help to have a behavior specialist in every building.
So how's that working out for you, Hazelwood? You focus all of your attention on the criminal element. You pat them on the head, you explain to them how they have to behave and be nice to the other students. You can't attack the students, you can't attack the teachers, you can't attack anybody coming to or from school in the morning. Pretty please? How's that working out? It works out as you would expect. It works out the same way it does all over the country. It works out the same way it does in other schools and other times and places in the St. Louis area. Terribly. So we've covered this at some length in my books and lots of videos. Every time something bad happens in St. Louis, every time everybody comes up with the big picture solution like Hazelwood, we always show what a catastrophe it is. And a few weeks later, they're out there going, hey, look, and they're out there telling us, hey, listen, we finally figured it out this time. Why don't I read a few sentences from Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, where, to their credit, we finally got at least one media outlet to point their finger at, I don't want to say the problem because they think the problem is really the solution, but to point their finger at what is really going on here. Last year, a reporter at the Fox affiliate, this is from Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, talked with a teacher who described what normal looks like at Ferguson schools. Constant chaos, constant violence, now spilling over in attacks on teachers. And oh yeah, that's been happening there for a long time, said a reporter as he rifled through a stack of papers documenting recent incidents. Back to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They had an explanation for the recent bulk removal of black students from black classrooms in the soon-to-be renamed Michael Brown Memorial High School. All right, I made that last part up. Anyway, in Ferguson, they figured out who's to blame. The white teachers. Quote, many new teachers are white and previously taught in more affluent suburban schools, said the paper. Some are struggling to connect with their students, most of whom are black and come from impoverished backgrounds. The penalty for not connecting is taunting, harassment, and violence so bad that many white teachers quit St. Louis area schools after the first day of classes.
And most people think black people can't be racist either, by the way.
If you're a teacher just out of college, here's what your life looks like. You've got a ton of student loan debt. And so if you go to an underserved district, they'll help you pay off your student loan as long as you teach there for the next 6 years. Well, the St. Louis schools are so bad that many teachers, they're suing dozens and dozens of teachers who broke their contract rather than go back into St. Louis schools and face this constant violence and threats and mayhem and chaos, faced with the constant ridiculous solutions like we just saw here. Treat criminals as if they're in emotional crisis, keep them in the classroom and totally blow off anybody else, and totally blow off any of their chances for getting any kind of education there. Okay, but let's not let the teachers off of this 100% either. Recently, there was a big meeting called the American Federation of Teachers. This is basically a labor union which is formed for the direct purpose of taking over school boards and controlling the national conversation. Now you got me talking like one of these crazy libs. Controlling the national conversation and policy on education. It's the inmates running the asylum. Anyway, the inmates recently had a big conference, and guess who they invited to speak? The Queen inmate herself, Joy Reid, where she explained to all the teachers, remember, teachers in America are mostly white, mostly women, where she explained to all the teachers that it's really white supremacism keeping them down because the white Christian right somehow is controlling all the school districts, and they're going to go full South Africa on us any day now, so get ready.
Next thing, very quickly, demographic change. There has been a flip in the demographic fortunes of white America, such that in several states, the rate of death, meaning suicide, death from drug overdoses, etc., is exceeding the rate of births. Of the states where deaths now exceed births for white Americans, 13 of those voted for Donald Trump and 13 of those voted for Hillary Clinton. 4 of them are states that flipped from President Obama in 2012 to Trump in 2016, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. Meaning that in states where white death rates are exceeding white birth rates, those states are starting to move toward the minority, toward the Republicans. Next, gerrymandering. There have been many studies that show, obviously, that gerrymandering is a system by which Republicans are protecting their power regardless of what the majority wants. But you had now the files of a gentleman named Thomas Hofeller, which were exposed to the country by his estranged daughter. On those files, he wrote a study in 2015 concluding that if a census question was added, a citizenship question was added to the census, it would enable Republicans to gerrymander and claim it's based on party, but he literally explicitly said it would enable them to prevent non-white people from gaining a majority, a power majority, that they could actually create a favorable condition for white people and Republicans by using the system in that way. So what I'll say is, to quickly wrap up, is that, you know, my parents are foreign, so I don't have this same sort of gauzy vision of either America's history or its possibilities. My father grew up in the Congo, which is also a system of minority rule based on tribe. And my mother came from a system in which the last president in her lifetime served for 24 years. No country is an eternal democracy. Democracy is extremely fragile, and multiracial democracy is so fragile, we're practically the only one that's pulled it off. My husband's from England. England has like 6% non-white people. This is a very difficult thing to maintain, and when you have a very determined minority, in this case, wealthy white men and wealthy white Christian men and Christian Americans who are of the fundamentalist variety, who are very clear that no matter what happens, if they have to pull the South Africa model to maintain power forever, they will do it. And
so if the teachers are going to be in denial, deceit, and delusion full on about the level of black crime and violence in their classrooms and how it's the constant thing, if they're not going to point the finger at it and call it out, not much else we can do here unless the parents miraculously start to do it. That's not going to happen either. Not in a black school.
Please, sir. I want some more.
Because black parents, they're really not part of this educational process most of the time. Marla Newbern talks about that at length, and don't make the black kids angry. We'll talk about this more on my podcast. So get on over there and listen to it when you get a chance. Warning. It might make the black kids angry.
Make the punches everywhere.